The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Welcome back to Full Contact with Eric Rush Live. We are here with attorney Montgomery Sibley and discussing the Doug Vogt affidavits and case regarding, before the Supreme Court now. They'll decide whether they want to have a look at it, having to do with the criminal fraud connected with President Obama's long-form birth certificate. And talking on off air, rather, we were sort of trying to make a decision on what we wanted to do with this last segment here. And the sealed affidavit that what is the status of the sealed affidavit that Doug Vogt has submitted to the Supreme Court?
Well, he created two affidavits originally. One was a public affidavit, which is all over the internet, or at least easily found.
Yeah.
And it describes the 20 points of forgery in Obama's birth certificate. The second one was another set of forensic analysis of the birth certificate and other birth certificates that have surfaced from Hawaii from the same vintage. And through what I consider to be compelling forensic analysis, he traces it back to a single individual who works near the capital in Hawaii. And through some very clever, jumps of logic and inferences, he's able to identify with what I think is enough probable cause to commence a criminal investigation, whether this person was the forger of the birth certificate. Additionally, there's some forensic accounting investigation of Loretta Fuddy's personal finances, which resulted in a disclosure that she received a substantial, I believe, $50,000 in cash shortly after she verified the Obama birth certificate as being legitimate. And your listeners may remember that it was late last year that Loretta Fuddy died in a very peculiar plane accident off the coast of Hawaii, shortly after Doug filed that sealed affidavit in the federal district court in Washington.
Uh-huh.
It was sealed so that a grand jury could investigate without tipping off the people who were named in that sealed affidavit.
Right.
And it becomes part of the evidence, which is now at the Supreme Court. And the question being presented with the evidence in the public and sealed affidavit, did the federal district court judge have a duty to submit the matter to the grand jury? Well, at the Supreme Court, we filed a sealed affidavit.
Uh-huh.
The Supreme Court refused to consider it. They said, after in an order saying, we're not going to seal this affidavit, we're not going to look at it. So Doug was left with the Hobson's choice of revealing it publicly or making sure the Supreme Court had actual notice of the criminal behavior of those who forged the birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
And he chose the latter course and unsealed it. So if, Eric, you were in D.C. and walked into the Supreme Court this afternoon, asked to see the file for case number 13-1158, you would be reading a 75-page affidavit with compelling evidence identifying the forger of the birth certificate, tracing its progression to the White House, and they're revealing some significant questions about Loretta Fuddy's finances, all of which puts the Supreme Court on notice that if they want to ignore their constitutional duty, they may believe there are no consequences, but legally, as things move forward here, Katie barred the door. They could be part of a conspiracy or aiding and abetting after the fact, allegation of treason to the United States.
Yeah, that is significant. So you're saying that essentially the individual, the party whom Doug Vogt alleges is the likely forger of the birth certificate is essentially, as of now, it is essentially publicly known. As you said, I have to go in there and ask to see the case, but it's a matter of public record at this juncture.
That's a true statement. The Supreme Court, unlike the other courts, do not put their documents on electronic records so it can be accessed through the internet.
Right.
So you have to go old school down to the court and ask to see the file, which I did recently, and there was the affidavit. So,
wow.
There it is. And the thing is, to me, the Supreme Court justices, like all federal judges, sit on a condition subsequent to their appointment, which is good behavior. That
Yes.
is, if you engage in bad behavior, you can be removed from your position. Having the knowledge that they are now constructively, if not actually aware of, the forgery of Obama's birth certificate, and if they fail to do anything about it, I would be arguing in the proper forum that this is bad behavior, warning the removal from the Supreme Court of 9 justices.
Oh, most definitely.
Not to mention a bunch of other judges down the chain back to the district court in Washington, that there has to be consequences if you're charged as a federal judge to summon a grand jury when presented with criminal evidence, and you fail to do so, that warrants you forfeiting your office for bad behavior in office.
I concur, and I'm not even an attorney. All right. Okay, there was, now we've got about 4 minutes left. What is, with regard to the Supreme Court and its, I guess you might call it a malicious transfer or a malignant transformation that's taken place over the years with regard to its function and what people perceive its function to be. We had touched a little bit on that off the air. Where is it you particularly wanted to go with that?
Well, the whole idea of the judiciary is that they will decide cases presented to them. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they must make a decision. The home plate umpire must call it a ball or strike, or the game cannot go on, because nobody knows that they're charged with that. And that duty is so high that Justice Marshall, back in 1821, in a case called Montgomery versus Madison, said it would be judicial treason if they failed to decide a case. And up until 1926, every case that went to the Supreme Court was decided, right, wrong, or indifferent. At that point in time, Chief Judge William Howard Taft, who later became president, petitioned for the Judiciary Act of 1925 and changed one word in the statute that regulates the Supreme Court. And instead of saying that the Supreme Court shall review every judgment of the lower courts properly presented to it, he changed the word shall to may, and it became discretionary rather than mandatory that they review everything.
Right.
Well, once a government body has discretion not to decide something, they're not a judiciary anymore. They are a legislature. I can go to the state legislature, the Congress, and say, I want you to change the speed limit laws. They can say, yes, we're going to change it, no, we're not going to change it, or we're not even going to consider it. And therefore, we have no decision. If you have judiciary that can decide we're not going to decide, they're no longer judiciary. If we don't have judiciary, we've lost 1/3 of the separation of powers of government.
Right.
So that's the high horse that I ride on, Eric, and why I feel that we have come to a turning point in this country where we must go back to our fundamental document and examine how it's being employed and reword the language to get us back to the original intention of how the separation of powers should work.
I think it's really amazing. I don't know if it's serendipitous or providential or what, I guess pick your term, that so many of these things seem to be coming to a head. We've got this issue, which I mean, until you have it, until you understand it, even in limited layman's terms, as I do now after hearing what you've had to say and examining the case, you've got this, and you've got such things as the Benghazi proceedings and all of these federal agencies that are being uncovered as being essentially the imperial stormtroopers for the administration, and anyone who is marginally politically engaged and conscientious and not an ideologue is, I mean, there's a lot that they're having to wake up to, and it's it all seems to be happening all at once, and it's not very pleasant. But I suppose at least if we know, the saying, I suppose, goes, the first step in solving a problem is realizing that it exists, and there are definitely quite a few problems that exist.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.